up, Mike. Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get a city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1438 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. A valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mike debut is Scott Laurie. Welcome to Toronto Mike, Scott.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I'm glad you're here. And off the top, Midtown Gord, who's a regular contributor to the program. Back in the day, Midtown Gord would phone into the Fan 590 and he would talk to like Gord Stellick and Damian Cox. Mm-hmm. And Gord Stellick gave him the nickname Midtown Gord. And this is now his handle. Like Gord said, it is so, Midtown Gord. And Midtown Gord's been a great supporter of this program. Midtown Gord says, I met Scott at Queen's Park last year when us education workers were striking. He puts in parentheses, protesting. Great chat. I was introduced to him by Jack Boland. I hadn't realized he was now with the Sun. This is from Midtown Gord. Are you with the Toronto Sun?
I'm not with the Toronto Sun. I was there for 19 months. It was great. Jack Boland, yes, a photographer who well known throughout the city, and it was great meeting Midtown Gord. I didn't know that was his nickname.
So you know him. He's the guy with the big beard.
Yes, giant beard. Great guy. We chatted for about 15 minutes or so outside Queen's Park, and it was during my time with the Toronto Sun.
You won't, if you're looking for Midtown Gord, I'm just going to let you know, Scott, just go to a Lee Aaron concert. This man won't miss a Lee Aaron. It doesn't matter if Lee Aaron's playing like a bowling alley, Midtown Gord will be there. So if you're looking for Midtown Gord, that's where you're going to find him.
I think Jack would help me as well, try to track him down if I had to.
Is Jack a metalhead? I don't know Jack.
Jack is, no, I wouldn't describe him as a metalhead. I just know him as, one of my pillars of support over the last couple of years because while I was at the Sun, we basically worked together almost every day. And he, one day a couple of years ago said, hey, you want to play hockey? And I hadn't played in 4.5 years because I wasn't mentally in that space. And he got me back into hockey. So. And
how's that going for you? Does it feel good to get out there with the people? I was going to say the guys, but there could be women on your team. Come on, the guys and sweat it out and have a great night of hockey. How's that working out for you?
I just played last night until about 11 p.m. and it was for an hour. It's the usual skate. I'm not injured, so that's good. And it's one of 3 games a week. And honestly, it's done wonders, I would say, for just my mental headspace, because if I didn't have that, I don't know where I would be. It's really...
Well, you need a coping mechanism.
Absolutely, a coping mechanism and just a way of dealing with everything. So...
Well, we're going to get into it. I would say that playing hockey 3 times a week, much better coping mechanism than heroin, for example. It's much better for you.
I can't say I've ever considered or tried that. Hockey's good enough. Gets the blood going.
Okay, good for you. Do you play with any rock stars? Are there any celebrities on your hockey team?
To me...
or you're the celebrity?
No, they're all celebrities. I mean, it's anyone who's, reached a certain age who's still playing hockey at, there's one of our players on Sunday who's 76.
Wow.
And we play at 9 o'clock in the morning. And every time my alarm goes off on Sunday, I think I can't not go because that guy's 76 and he's our goalie and he's going to be there. So,
and goalies are very, as I know from my men's league back in the day, the beer league, goalies are everything, right? Like if you don't have that goalie, the game's going to suck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They are the essential pillar of the games.
They're the Raymond. Sorry, I was going to say they're the Ridley Funeral Home of hockey players. They're pillars of the team. You got to have that goalie here. Yes, Scott, stick with me. I'm going to teach you a few tricks here. Okay, so let's go back before we. I'm going to read a question from Hamilton Mike that's going to introduce the real talk here. But when did you realize in your life, Scott, that you wanted to be in news media? Like, did you have this epiphany in high school? When did you realize this was the career for you?
I think I was about 14.
Okay.
Might have been 13. I can't exactly say the time, but for some reason, I grew up in Montreal, and CTV in Montreal at the time was CFCF. Okay. CFCF was anchored by Bill Hoagland, and we had Channel 12 on all the time, Pulse News it was called, and Bill Hoagland was the anchor forever. And I could not stop watching Bill. And one day I just decided I want to be Bill Hoagland. I want
to do that.
Right. And so, not long after that, I had a paper route delivering the Montreal Gazette. And, at the time inside the newspaper, there were always little world briefs, little snippets from around the world. There were maybe 2 or 3 sentences. And I would basically, take one of those world briefs or a few of them and pretend that I was an anchor. And I would look down at them and try to remember what the 3 sentences were and then look up and say them like Bill Hoagland. So it was way back.
Well, this is like many a hockey play-by-play person has started by, calling fictional games in their backyard or their basement or whatever. So you're just playing the role of anchor.
Right, exactly. That's when it started. I was about 14 years old. Okay. And, those memories stick with you, they don't just go away. And then eventually I got to work with Bill, and it was just completely just awe-inspiring to meet him. And then I worked with his son, who was a fantastic editor and sound person. And, it kind of went full circle there.
What brings you to Toronto?
I was in Montreal with CTV for about 5 years, and then CTV started up a news channel, and a couple of years into the existence of news channel, that was about 97.
Right.
A couple of years into news channel's, lifespan, I figured, well, I'll try my hand at anchoring, and, I'll fill in on Christmas, once and see how it goes. And it went okay. And then that sort of led to moving to Toronto and taking on part-time anchor.
Well, it sounds to me like you were playing in Springfield, and then the capital city tapped you on the shoulder and says, you're getting the call, right?
I still belonged in Springfield.
Is that because you haven't? I just had a guest, Stu Stone, and we went on a tangent where he disclosed to me this imposter syndrome that he had, because he's like, he feels like he's a bit of an imposter in all the wonderful things he's done with his career. But you must have felt like you belong in the big smoke here. Like where does News Channel come out of? Toronto? That's where I belong.
You know what? It probably took me about a half a decade to really feel comfortable in the role. Right. Like for the first couple of years, I thought, oh my goodness, what am I doing? I mean, this is just not, it's not working out, right? And you just keep at it. And, I think about 5 years in, I thought, okay, I think I'm sort of getting the hang of this.
Have you always worked for CTV? Like was your first media job at CFCF?
No. My first job was actually here in Toronto. Which was...
It's a long drive for you from Montreal.
It was... I finished school, and I had already had a sort of great relationship with the CBC because of internships and a summer job that I had here in Toronto. And so as soon as I graduated, I think about 4 days later, I started in Toronto, working at the National News World at the time.
Well, that's pretty good to graduate and then 40 days later be working there. That's a pretty sweet happening.
It was literally 4 days, and wow. and I moved here, and I for a while because I was making the big switch from Montreal to Toronto.
Yeah,
I didn't know anything about the city really, and for a while I was living at Neil Wysick, the Ryerson student housing, right?
I know whereabouts it is.
Yeah,
sure.
I was living there for a couple of months before I could find a place to live, and that was my first job. I did that for about 4 years here in Toronto, and then I started anchoring locally here, but because I didn't know the city, the way somebody who was born here does, I thought, it'd be better if I go back to Montreal and do local reporting there because I know the city.
Like, to pronounce Strawn as Strawn and not Strachan or something like that.
I remember once I said Etobicoke.
Yeah, okay.
I said Etobicoke, and the anchor leaned into me on that one, and I was like, I moved here like 5 minutes ago. Like, that says Etobicoke.
You're right. You don't know these little things that you just know from osmosis, having lived here. All these little quirks and quirks. I always bring up Strawn because you're now an FOTM, Scott, friend of Toronto Mike. So welcome to that esteemed fraternity. But another FOTM is Al Strachan, who was on Hockey Night in Canada for many years.
Absolutely.
And it's spelled like, I bike Strawn all the time when you go into Trinity Bellwoods or whatever from the waterfront trail. So I'm on Strawn all the time. Most El Torontonians know Strawn, but it's spelled the same way. Like, so this whole like Strachan versus Strawn, you have to be Spadina versus Spadina. There are a million of these things. You got to be well versed in Toronto to speak the language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I learned that lesson pretty quickly at CBLT. Working with,
tell me who you were, because that was I watched a lot of CBLT news. Tell me who you were.
CBLT. It was a great training ground. I have this great memory of following around Havard Gould, who was at Queen's Park at the time. Well, he was at Queen's Park forever, and I just sort of followed him for a day, and he gave me a lot of great tips on how to build a story, how to craft a story, what a clip is, how long it should be. Steve Paikin was there, which it was
practically my co-host on this program, Steve Paikin.
He was honestly, everyone at CBLT was nice. Everyone, okay? Steve Paikin was golden, and he gave me one bit of advice. He said he was, he knew I was very new at reporting, and he said, listen, when you go out and you're doing your story and you're talking to people, always do an on-camera. Even if you don't use it in editing, always do it on camera. And that just stayed with me. It was just the whole practice of being on camera and being comfortable. And
that's a great tip, I think
it was fantastic.
Picking more than just a pretty face. I'm learning this now.
Yep.
Okay. Any more names you want to drop from these years you spent at CBLT when you first came here?
Bill Cameron.
Oh, I loved Bill Cameron. The shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. Lost him far too soon, but what a great broadcaster.
Great person as well. I mean, he came over from, at the time was the Journal, and then it switched to Primetime News. He came over from the Journal, and he was the anchor for a couple of years, something like that. And again, just great advice. Somebody to look up to. It was a great experience working with.
Taken from us far too soon. But there was a guy I would have loved to have got Bill Cameron on Toronto Mic'd. Like, I'm happy to have Scott Laurie on Toronto Mic'd, but I would love to have.
You'd be better off with Bill. He was fantastic. And I was only
a medium or something. But what were you going to say? Then?
I was only at CBLT I started July a long time ago, and
non-committal on those days.
Yeah, July a long time ago, and I left, I think, in October because my boss at the National.
Same year.
Oh,
4 months or something.
Yeah, and
how good I am at math.
Actually, no, it was not 4 months later.
Okay.
It was the next year.
Okay.
So I was there for under 2 years.
Okay.
And then they said, well, we've got a local reporting job in Montreal if you want. Absolutely, chance to go home.
Chance to go home. Okay, so how do you end up at CTV? In many regards, this is your dream job to be at CTV. Like, I'm going to guess this, and you're going to tell me if I'm out to lunch. But I'm thinking when you visualize your dream gig, you want to be, taking over for Lloyd Robertson. Am I close there? Like Lloyd's got the gig.
Absolutely, but I never thought that at all. I mean, I was very happy doing local news in Montreal. It was great. you get to do a story a day. It's a lot of practice. You get to, deepen your connection to the community.
Right.
And out of the blue, I think CTV knew they were expanding because they had all these specialty channels that they were creating. And the head of CTV News reached out, and then Rosemary Thompson, who was the Montreal bureau chief at the time, she reached out, and I ended up making the switch from CBC local to CTV national.
Right.
So I was in the same building as Pulse News, as CFCF, CTV Montreal, but I didn't actually work for them. I was working for the national news.
Okay, and so what year is it when you start your CTV news career?
That was 95.
95. Okay, let me ask you this. Were you an Expos fan?
Baseball and I don't
you don't
really
have to be.
get along.
Shout out to Leslie Taylor and Brian Gerstein and all these Expos fanatics that are listening. Steve Cole. You don't have to be a baseball fan. I'm only because I just read the other day they're going to make a documentary for Netflix about the Expos leaving Montreal. And I was just curious if you were one of those diehard Expos fans who had their heart broken.
Well, not only that, not only are they planning that documentary, but they're also, there's always this undercurrent of pressure and hope that can the Expos come back?
Right.
Right. It's just one of those stories that never goes away because Montrealers have that emotional connection to the team and they'd love it to come back. Kind of like the Nordiques in Quebec, but
right.
Is that going to happen? I don't know.
No, I don't know either. Because I'm born and raised in Toronto, I've never had a team I loved ripped from me. Like, I can only imagine, and I have these conversations with people, be it like, oh, I was a diehard Jets fan, and then they went, where did they go? Atlanta? No, Phoenix, right? They went to Phoenix. I got to keep track. Atlanta came back. That's right. Okay. So, or I was an Expos guy. I was a Nordique fan, like or a Grizzlies fan, right? In Vancouver. But Toronto, we've lost franchises that nobody cared about. Like, we didn't lose our Raptors or our Blue Jays or, definitely didn't lose our Toronto Maple Leafs.
And that's not going to happen anytime soon.
I know that would be quite the story to cover. Okay, so now we've got you in Toronto. I'm going to play a clip, just a minute here, to hear how did Scott Laurie sound?
Oh, jeez.
And by the way, it was called. Did they rebrand it at some point? It was called News Channel. Is it still? But is Newsnet? Why do I think it has multiple names? The CTV News Channel.
Originally, if memory serves me correctly, I believe it was News One at first, then it was Newsnet, then it was News Channel.
And is that what it is today? News Channel?
I believe yes, it is.
Okay,
it's CTV News.
I'm asking you the tough questions here, Scott. Yeah. Okay, so even less than a minute here of Scott on CTV News Weekend here.
Right now on CTV News Channel, down to the wire, U.S. lawmakers prepare to vote on a historic health care bill. A third deadly avalanche in a week in British Columbia. 2 are dead. And all good things must come to an end. Saying goodbye to the 2010 Paralympic Games. This is CTV News Weekends. Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Scott Laurie. Our top story right now, the 2010 Paralympic Games are about to come to a close, but before they do, Canada has won another gold. Brian McKeever.
All right, 2010 here. Is it difficult for you to listen to this?
Wow, that's a long time ago.
14 years ago.
I can't remember that specific day, but I remember the games, definitely. I think at that time I was covering, I was doing weekend anchoring, but also we had an Olympic desk at the time.
Sure.
Because of Vancouver, obviously.
Well, yesterday was the anniversary of Sidney Crosby's golden goal.
Beautiful.
Which was the last day of the games. And that's the way, if you were going to write the story of, us hosting the Olympics in 2010, you write it with Crosby scoring in overtime to win gold.
With an assist from Jerome McGinley.
Iggy!
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. His kid's good. Oh, Ginla's got a kid, apparently. It just, everything's a junior now. This is the future of sports. Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero, they're all going to be juniors. We've got Max Domi on the Leafs, right? Like, it's all going to be juniors. Okay, I digress here. But Yes, so that's almost exactly, that means it's almost exactly 14 years ago because the Paralympic Games come right after the Olympics in the host city. But I know that when I mentioned I had a clip, you said it's been a while since you watched, and then maybe we should cut right to it. This is how we're going to do it, because this is going to be some real talk here. I really want to hear your story and understand your story. But let me just tell you that no matter what happens in the next little bit, you're not leaving here without a palma pasta lasagna. It's in my freezer right now. I know you moved the box and you're like, that's awfully light. There's no lasagna in there. It's in my freezer. I'm going to load this up before you leave here, Scott. So you're getting a palma pasta lasagna.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Oh, listen, I'm not done yet. I feel like Monty Hall here. Fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery is heading your way too. That's just the most delicious craft beer in this city, and we love Great Lakes. So they've sent over the beer for you. Palma Pasta sent over the lasagna. Ridley Funeral Home, they don't want to see you anytime soon, Scott, but they did send over a measuring tape for you. Might come in handy if you got a, insert joke here. If you have to measure anything, that's courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home. A couple of pieces of advice, and then I'm going to read a note from Hamilton Mike, and then we're going to get into it, because there's a date, March 24, 2018, which was almost exactly 6 years ago that you were fired, and we're going to get into this, but let me just let everybody know, whether you manage your own financial investments or you have a person who does that for you, there are best practices and great advice in the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James Canada. So subscribe to the Advantaged Investor podcast. And Scott, if you or anyone listening has a drawer full of cables, you got old devices, I don't know, laptops from 2004 that are never going to be used again. You got any of that junk in your house? No? Yes?
I do not. No.
Okay.
I might have some cables, but a laptop, no.
You don't have anything collecting dust in the corner. Okay, no. But for those who do, and even for your cables, Scott, if you go to recyclemyelectronics.ca and you put in your postal code, EPRA is like, hey, there's a place we accredited near you where they will properly recycle that, and then it won't. The chemicals won't end up in our landfill. So we've got you taken care of. Lasagna, beer, measuring tape, best practices. Hamilton Mike writes in when he heard that you were coming on. He says, I just read his Medium post. Probably the most egregious case and example of Bell's Let's Talk being complete corporate horseshit. So that's Hamilton Mike who wrote that. But I thought that would be our gateway. Would you mind sharing the story? I'm going to read the first lines from what you wrote, and then we're just going to chat about this. You wrote, Scott, I want my name back. What happened to me in the CTV national newsroom at Bell Media in 2018 was an injustice. For 6 years, I have lived with this. I have been tarnished with an unfair public impression that I am a workplace risk because of the continuing and overwhelming cost to me on my career, my mental health, my personal relationships, my quality of life, and my name. I cannot be silent anymore. What was done to me must be known. Okay, now I'm going to shut up because I want to hear from you, Scott. Set the table for us here and share with us what happened to you at the CTV National back in 2018.
Well, first off, I'm glad that Hamilton Mike read the post, and I'm sure many others who are curious may want to read it as well. I mean, all I can say is that I was in that post just being as upfront and honest as possible on, I had a front row seat to what happened. Nobody had a worse, better seat than me. And I saw everything happen in real time, and it was a complete injustice. And why do I want my name cleared? It's been damaged, period. And anyone who would have this kind of experience would want to do the same thing. If you can't rise up and defend your name, what can you do? And so that's why I wrote that.
So why did it take 6 years? Is it just you now feel brave enough to share your story? I'm just curious because it's been 6 long years for you.
Why 6 years? Number one, it is absolutely never, ever, ever too late to call out injustice, ever. 6 years, 60 years, doesn't matter. Number two, again, this is having an effect on me every single day. And why did I? It took me about 6 weeks to write that, and the idea came from a friend of mine from high school who said, maybe you should write something.
Share your story.
And why did it take me 6 weeks to write? Because I had to think about everything that happened. Like, what do I want to say? How do I want to say it? What am I trying to convey here? And again, it is about the injustice, and it continues. What happened 6 weeks ago? Well, 6 weeks ago, I had a fantastic job interview. Fantastic. It was about 45 minutes. Sometimes you have a conversation with somebody, whether it's a job interview or just a conversation, and you feel like, yeah, you know what? I think there was a connection there. I really think that's going to work. And after the job interview, it was, the usual, we'll get back to you with next steps and all that. And then I heard nothing. I heard absolutely nothing. And it's not as if I have, a bad resume. It's not as if I don't have any skills. I was at CTV for 23 years. I was at the Toronto Sun for 19 months. I was at the Ontario government very recently for a short amount of time. I have absolute skills, but 6 weeks ago, after a great job interview, all of a sudden it was crickets. And the problem is that since last summer, that has happened 5 times.
Wow.
5 times. 5 interviews, 5 panels, 5 great connections, crickets. And there's only one reason why. People have this mistaken impression, of who I am. And it's completely false. So I had to put my side of the story out there. My side of the story, sure, there are going to be people. There are always people who are going to disagree. There are always people who are going to say, "Well, wait a second, that's not my reading of what happened." But I had a front row seat to that. I saw what everyone did, and that's the truth.
Well, you can look again. My approach to this, and actually, it's interesting. This is Bell Media only because years ago there was a News Talk 1010 reporter named Amber Giro, and she wanted to share her story about racism that she experienced in the 1010 newsroom. So she was working this is back when they had a newsroom at 1010. They don't have one anymore, but that's a whole different conversation. But Amber came over. It was episode 115, if people want to hear, and she shared her story. And I just did a lot of listening. And then when I had, questions about the narrative and stuff, I asked my questions, which I will do here now. Mm-hmm. But you, Scott, you're telling your story. Scott, you were there. I wasn't there. I'm very interested in walking through this because, you lost your dream job at the CTV national news there. And maybe you can start to share the story that you shared on your Medium post there. And then when I have questions, I'll pipe in. But just so people listening can understand, like why is there, and I'm going to use this terminology, why might there be like a bit of a stink on you? Like, it's like people think, oh, don't hire Scott Laurie. It's trouble because of what went down in 2018. Like, share your truth now, best you can, and then I'll try to stay out of your way until I have questions.
Okay, so strangely enough, this goes all the way back to about August of 2017. And 2017, yeah. We were, at the time, the Invictus Games were going on. Okay, they were Invictus Games here in Toronto, big deal. Big production, TSN.
Prince Harry.
Yes, Prince Harry, the romance, everything. It was just big news on it was a sporting event. It was a People magazine event. It was everything. And we had regular updates on the Invictus Games. Right. So one day we were doing a live hit with Brian Williams from TSN.
Of course.
Amazing broadcaster. And
the time, Scott, as we talk now, is 10:19 Eastern.
Exactly. So we're doing a live hit with Brian Williams, and honestly, it was the for that entire hour, we started at 6 and we were going until 8, which was our usual run.
Yeah.
And from between 6 and 6:42, and I'm not making that up, it was between 6 and 6:42, we made 6 production errors. Just errors, right? Things that didn't go well, and it really came to a head during the Brian Williams interview. We were interviewing, I think he was downtown in Nathan Phillips Square, and it was a gong show. It was almost like, wow, CTV can't do television anymore, right?
It's like when you were watching Rogers 10 back in the day, and youngsters were cutting their teeth in how to put together a production.
Yeah. So the show is just a disaster, and I was not happy, and I emailed one of the senior producers saying, we should take more pride in what we're doing. And they asked me what's going on. I said, well, look at the tape tomorrow. And they did. And then they had a conversation with the producer, and the producer did not like me after that because I called out her work.
You escalated. This is a woman, this producer? Or,
right.
Not that gender matters, but just if I'm going to genderize her. So they basically they didn't like that you escalated to like a boss, that they didn't do a good job on this live hit.
Oh, but it was terrible. Right. I remember at 8:00 when we finished that run of live news and I walked into the newsroom, everyone asked me, what happened at 6? I was like, I don't know. Right? I just don't know. But because I called out somebody's work,
right,
they were then mad at me. They were just mad at me, and so that was that was in August. Okay,
August 2017.
Right. I forget the date exactly, but it was August. Excuse me. Then a couple of months later, one day we're in the newsroom. We're covering a story. It was a Sunday evening. We're covering a story about a police news release that went out from TPS, basically saying, hey, we're looking for this woman who ran this not cosmetic surgery, but cosmetic procedure clinic in the basement of her home.
Well, like Botox injections.
And all manner of things.
Fillers.
Right. And so the police were looking for the woman who ran this clinic. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because somebody who went to the clinic, or a couple of people who went to the clinic, ended up having to go to the hospital because of work they had done in this basement clinic. I think it was called Miss Kitty or something like that. It was the kind of story that people would click on because it was so crazy.
Right.
So we did this story. The producer of that newscast at the time was the same one who I had called out.
And just so we know as we go through, so you're intentionally not naming anyone, which is fine. So okay, just to clear that up, because people are going like, who is this producer? But you don't want to name these producers, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And because of the adjudication that happened, they have anonymity.
Okay.
So Miss Kitty, the Miss Kitty story. They're looking for this person. They need to arrest them because of, these people getting harmed after going to her clinic.
If you go in for a butt lift, you want to make sure that that's going to be a proper, safe job, right?
And you don't end up in emergency after. Well, these people ended up in emergency.
Right.
So after the show was done, we all came into the newsroom and I said, that was a great show. It's a good thing we got that Miss Kitty story in there because, it's the kind of thing, again, that people would click on and be interested in. And there were 5 of us sort of chatting around the pod. We were getting ready to go home probably in about 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
And the producer, who's already mad at me because I called out
in August 2017, yeah.
Right. So now we're in October, and the producer looked at me and said, yeah, Miss Kitty, that's probably where Scott got his lips done.
Whoa.
Right. And in my mind, that's what I said.
Yeah.
And my initial reaction was, these are my natural lips.
May I ask you to just racially identify this producer? Is this a white woman? Or is that too much? It's your call on this one, but I'm just curious. Is this a white woman?
I would technically be identifying them if I do that.
Then don't do anything that'll get you in trouble here. Okay.
Yeah.
But I can tell the listenership, Scott, if you don't know, because how would you know? It's not part of the story, but you are a black man.
Yeah, there you
part of the
go.
story, okay.
And so my initial reaction when I heard that was like, did I just hear that?
Yeah.
Well, that's insane.
Yeah.
Right. And I just said, these are my natural lips. And there were like 4 other people around there. And it was kind of like one of those moments where everyone goes silent.
Yeah.
And then we all just
Because of how inappropriate that is.
right. And then we all just went away. And I went home and I was broiling. I was just stewing over this. Did I really hear that? And no one said anything. Right. It's just, an inappropriate racist joke.
Yeah.
And no one said anything. So I went home and thought about it. And the next day I came in and I went up to 3 different people at work and I said, hey, somebody said this to me yesterday. What do you think? And they were like, oh, that's racist.
Yeah.
And then I went to the boss and I said, this happened to me. And they were shocked. Their reaction was your reaction.
Well, it's because it sounds very racist to me to make it's almost like those racial caricatures you would back in the day with a big-lipped person eating watermelon. Like, this is racist.
Exactly. And that's basically what I was subject to. And a lot of people don't know that. They have no clue that happens, right? They just know, oh, Scott's got this major stink around him. No, there was a whole series of events that led up to this.
Right.
And that was the racist remark that was made in the newsroom. And I complained and this person got in trouble. And I was so mad about it that I insisted I do not want to work with this producer again. I do not. And it took me 3 weeks to convince my bosses to move this person. Originally it was, well, she apologized. No. I don't want to, I have grown up my entire life, facing remarks like that. Right? From the time that I was in Montreal growing up in an English guy in a totally French neighborhood, I have heard everything. And at a certain point, it's almost like the comment that just broke my tolerance. And it was like, no, I am not going to sit on a CTV News anchor desk and have a producer in my ear who I know can stoop to that level and say something like that. And so I insisted that I did not want to work with them anymore. And it took 3 weeks for them to finally move her. And there was a whole song and dance. I mean, they tried to move me. And I said, well, I'm not going to be inconvenienced because of somebody else's...
You shouldn't be punished.
Right. I'm not going to be inconvenienced because of somebody else's racism. I'm not going to move. You move them, which they did. Well, about 3 days after they got moved, bunch of people in the newsroom went out for a beer because everybody was talking about this. Like, nobody knew exactly what happened, but they just knew, well, something happened between Scott and the...
Anyone who's worked in any office, forget a newsroom or any other office, okay, if it was in front of colleagues that she made the comment about your lips, this producer, and therefore, everybody is sharing this story immediately through either instant messenger or let's go for a coffee. You won't believe what happened today.
I really don't know.
Well, I know. Okay, Scott. It spreads pretty quickly.
I don't know what the conversations were, but what I do know is that a group of people went out for beer about 3 or 4 days after the producer was finally moved.
Right.
And the next day, one of my friends in the newsroom phoned me. Which he never does. He phoned me and he said, hey, listen, I don't know what you did, but a whole bunch of the producer's friends in the newsroom said at beer yesterday that they're going to get you. Right? They actually told him that they were going to get me. And they did.
Like revenge, essentially.
Yes, retribution because I complained about a racist remark. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And nobody actually knows all of that, right? And that's why I spelled it out in what I wrote on Medium.
And I'll speak because I'm not a black man. I will never know what it's like to live life as a black man, but I absolutely know how to listen and other people tell me stories. I mean, I've heard people who have been pulled over for DWB, okay? I'm never going to get pulled over for DWB, but I've heard from people who've shared me these stories with me. So I'm here to learn. But in your lifetime, you're bringing baggage with you because it sounds like you've experienced racism in your lifetime because you're a black man, and you have that baggage with you. So now that you're in this dream job, a very professional setting, right, the CTV newsroom, to have like a bigoted statement like that thrown at you by this producer, it's not something you can laugh off and just go, like, yeah, like that's like, say sorry and we'll move on. Like this is I just want to emphasize the significance of how this would affect you to experience this racism in the newsroom in 2017.
Yes, exactly. And I was measured in how I dealt with it. It took me 24 hours to figure out, you know what, I am going to go to the boss and say something. And then I was just not happy with the apology. It was just, no, I'm not. Again, as I said before, I was not going to have somebody in my ear giving me editorial direction during the show every day for 3 hours who I know can say something like that. And their friends wanted to get me.
So okay, I have questions about this. So essentially, this producer we're not naming who made these comments about your lips there, she's got this, I want to call it a clique, only because I had read pieces about when Lisa LaFlamme was let go. There were pieces suggesting that there was a clique. And I'm wondering, like, so there's almost, would you say that's an appropriate term? Like a consortium of colleagues who were going to, stand up for their friend who had been, slighted by you and get you.
Well, that's exactly what happened. I think she was moved, November the 22nd. My friend called me the next day. Her friends went to the boss to complain about me about 4 days later, maybe 5 days, and apparently this was not retribution, right? Of course it was. And what's stunning is that no one recognized that. Absolutely no one recognized that this was retribution, especially, and I didn't know this until much further on in the process, but one of the people who came forward to complain about me was the same producer who made the racist remark. I mean, if that doesn't raise red flags with managers, I don't know what would.
So I'm curious, again, I wasn't there, but you were there, Scott, but you got this, we'll call this person Deep Throat, okay? You got the call from inside the room that they're conspiring against you. Was that the message you received? So this ally of yours in the newsroom was giving you a heads up that this group of people were upset about what happened to the producer friend, and they were going to get retribution and get revenge on you. And then you're saying it was only days later that complaints were levied about you, which well obviously I'm going to have to ask you soon what these complaints were, but complaints were levied against you, and one of the complainers was the very producer who was had her her projects aligned not to work with you because she had made a insensitive racist remark. Am I right?
Exactly.
Okay, correct me if I'm ever wrong. I just want to get this right.
So yeah, they came forward. I didn't know they had come forward. I was totally unaware. I mean, this was, the beginning of December. January rolls around, and my friend ally in the newsroom,
Deep Throat,
right at the beginning of January of 2018.
Okay,
right. Weeks have gone by, right, since he warned me. Right, weeks have gone by, and I remember sending him an email one day, just randomly saying, "Hey, whatever happened to this group that was out to get me?" And he wrote back, "I guess that blew over." Right, and that was January. What I didn't know is that at the time, there was an investigation going on into me. Right, it's
because of these allegations against you.
Right, and it started in December. It rolled into January. It rolled into February. It went on for 3 months. Okay. They did an investigation for 3 months.
Well,
and
yeah, sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting. Is now a good time though to share with us what were these claims that they were making against you? So how many people made these claims, and what were these claims about you?
2 people came forward initially in December. Then 2 other people came forward in January. But again, I was unaware of that until much later on.
May I ask, so that's 4 different individuals who are going to make claims against you, which will be revealed in a moment, I suppose. But these 4 people, are they all part of this clique that Deep Throat was warning you about, or at least tied to that clique?
Well, I don't know if he knew exactly the extent of the clique or the group, but he knew some of them. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And their basic claims were that I was harassing them by sending them messages on Facebook that they deemed inappropriate. They thought it was harassment, and one of them said it bordered on stalking, which I don't know. Stalking is a criminal offense. Last time I checked. And yeah, that's basically what their claims were.
Okay, so 4 different women said that you were, I don't know, inappropriately messaging them through Facebook, or am I getting that right?
Yes.
Okay. I have to ask the obvious question, but were you sending messages like, your ass looks great in that skirt today? Is that the kind of stuff? I know, I'm asking. I have no idea. I wasn't there.
No.
Okay.
And
Right.
put it to you this way.
Yeah.
Just so that we're clear on this.
Yeah, please.
The investigator who was taking in the complaints, right? The investigator looked into it for 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, she wrote, this is all in my Medium post, but she wrote a 2.5-page email to her boss, someone in Bell. It's not like a Bell Media person. This is Bell. And the 2.5-page email, basically the conclusion was, it's not harassment. It's not vexatious. The women do find it harassing. So I at the end, it was something like, maybe we send them on a course or something like that.
Sensitivity training.
Right. That was her conclusion. And she sent that email on March.
But did she say whether you should be fired or not? Was there any commentary from this investigator? And this is an independent investigator, or is this like a Bell person investigating these allegations?
This is somebody inside Bell.
Okay. But did they make any suggestions, any conclusions regarding whether you should keep your job or not?
Their conclusion was that I should not be fired. Again, their conclusion was that it wasn't harassment and wasn't vexatious.
I have to Google vexatious, Scott. I'm sorry.
I at the time I did as well, just to be clear on it. But I was again shocked to learn that email even existed,
right,
because it took a couple of years before we had that document.
Okay, I'm going to read though for people as dumb as I am. Okay, so causing or tending to cause annoyance, frustration, or worry. So this investigation said it's not vexatious, so it's not causing or tending to cause annoyance, frustration, or worry. Just throwing it out there. Okay, so in fact, that's a good thing she wrote there for you.
Right, and she wrote it on March the 8th. This is roughly 3 months after the people come forward. So it's not as if they looked into it for 5 days or 5 hours and came up with a conclusion. She read pages and pages of Facebook messages, and again, this was her conclusion to her boss on March the 8th. Yet, on March the 22nd, I met her for the first time.
Okay.
I met
the
her.
investigator.
Yeah.
Okay.
So her conclusion to her boss has already been made.
On March 8th.
Right. She meets me on the 22nd.
Okay.
She changes her mind the next day for whatever reason, and suddenly I get dismissed the next day.
So you're fired on March 24th, and then you meet the investigator on March 22nd, and you did you get a copy of this report or whatever was submitted to?
I did not know that existed until about a year and so later.
Okay, Scott, very interesting. Okay, did you ever get a copy of this? Did you ever see what was written on March 8th? Because March 8th, 2018 is when this investigator submits her conclusions.
Right. I only knew that document existed in April of 2019 in the middle of the adjudication because we asked for documentation.
Wow.
And, her one official email to her boss basically cleared me.
exonerated you, and again said it was nothing vexatious and did not constitute harassment. And her conclusion at that time, March 8, is that you should not lose your job. But then you're telling me you actually met with this investigator on March 22nd. Did you meet like one-on-one?
One-on-one for about 3 hours. And it was, 2 until 5 p.m. And I outlined to her, because she said, she told me, 2 people have come forward and this is what they're claiming. And, just give me your version of events. And I, gave her my version of events. And, as soon as I heard the names, I thought about what my ally told me, that
Deep Throat.
Right. Somebody's going to quote unquote get you. And it matched up. And I said, hey, this is, they're basically seeking retribution because I made a racist or a complaint about a racist remark.
Now, hindsight being 2020, and this, for all I know, this is haunting you. And thank goodness you have the hockey every 3 weeks, because we're going to find out how this has affected
every
you.
3 days.
Every 3 days, every 3 weeks. I meant every week you play 3 times a week, right? So every 3 weeks, you need more than that. But do you now look back and say, man, I shouldn't have met with this investigator alone? Does any part of you say you wish you had a lawyer or some kind of representative present? I just feel like whatever happened in that March 22nd interview, you one-on-one with this investigator, she changed her mind. And I mean, it sounds like after that meeting, she's like, we should dismiss this guy. Like they deemed you a liability somehow.
I don't.
My speculation.
I really don't know how she changed her mind. And at the end of 3 hours, she actually said to me, it was about 5 minutes to 5 on that Thursday, and she said to me, well, thanks, Scott, for coming in on your day off and meeting with me. And actually, there was one other person there. It was from corporate security, which I found it odd that they need somebody from security there. I mean, it's not like I'm...
Maybe that's like
standard practice.
Yeah, standard practice.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a Scott thing.
So at the end of the 3 hours, she said to me, you've given me a lot of homework to do, right? Because of what I basically told her what I just told you. Hey, this is about retribution for me making a complaint not that long ago. And this is why all of a sudden you have these people coming forward. And I got the impression that she was going to look into it, right? I gave her the name of my friend who told me, hey, somebody's out to get you. And I don't know what they're going to do, but they're planning something. I was under the impression she's going to circle back to the ally in the newsroom. She's going to look into, the history between myself and the producer who made the racist remark. None of that was done. It was basically all of a sudden the next day, things just switched, and I have absolutely no idea why.
Okay, for a little context here, if we look back to 6 years ago, this is pretty hot and heavy Me Too era stuff. Like this
completely,
is, right,
absolutely, so, it was dominant.
Right. Absolutely. I remember. Well, of course, Harvey Weinstein, and then you had Kevin Spacey. There was a whack of
Patrick Brown.
Yeah, Patrick Brown, absolutely. You're right, absolutely. And even in America, you had, was it whoever, Matt Stone? I'm getting these names mixed up now, so maybe I'll stop talking because I can't remember. Matt Lauer, that's the guy. Okay, there's a Stone out there somewhere. But this is where conflation happens. I'm going to get back to conflation later when it talks about all these interviews you've had lately where it sounds like it's going good in the interview and suddenly cricket. So we'll get back to that and I'll tell you my conflation theory. But they let you go on March 24th, 2018 in this Me Too era after whatever you said on March 22nd and then whatever this investigator did after that. So the quick question I have is, do they sever you fairly? Like do they properly sever you for your time spent working for the company financially?
No.
Okay, so now I had a guy, so you know, there's a guy named Mike Stafford who has been here, who worked 20 years for Chorus, and then he actually, on an internal chat, he used the P slur for people of South Asian descent. And he was doing it in a way that was, he was trying to say Doug Ford using that in this joke internally. Bottom line is he didn't use asterisks. Like he spelled out this P slur. and he was fired, and he got $0.00 from Chorus from his 20 years, and he now has a lawyer, actually, thanks to his appearance on this podcast, which is a whole different story. But are they saying you were fired with cause?
Yes. Absolutely.
That sucks, man. Okay.
And what doesn't make sense is that why would you have an investigator do 3 months of work, right? You put in all this time talking to everyone, and then you make a conclusion that basically says, "Hey, it's not what we think it is. It's not harassment." And then within 24 hours, it changed. It just changed for whatever reason.
Yeah, I'm just processing it all right now, because it's, even though I read what you wrote on Medium, and people can go read the words that took you 6 weeks to write, right? So there's your chance to edit and make sure you're being clear. Where now, I'm not going to edit this, Scott. So it's like now you're having this live conversation. So people should read the Medium article that you wrote, which is easy to find. Hamilton Mike found it right away. But I'm still processing this. So did you fight for severance? Were you able to extract what was owed to you after having so many years working for CTV News?
The first thing I did after this happened, I was in shock. I mean, it didn't make sense. All I was thinking was, I made a complaint about a racist remark,
right?
And at the end of the entire process, I lost my job. Had I not made a complaint, I would probably still be there, period. That's crazy.
It's crazy when you hear it lined up like that. But what's happening, I'm speculating here, is HR is not tying these two events together. Like, they're treating them as two mutually exclusive events.
You would not have to be that much of you don't have to be that gifted to really realize that, man, if all these people come forward all of a sudden, including the producer who made the racist remark, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out.
I'm with you, yeah. Now, you don't need to be Columbo is what you're telling me. Or I'll go with Mike Logan on Law & Order. I'm an OG Law & Order guy. Detective Mike Logan would have figured this out very, very quickly. But okay, so speaking of canceled, he got canceled, that actor. And just, anyways, he dies, and I could go on about what happened to the actor who portrayed Mike Logan, but he's Mr. Big on Sex and the City. If you're curious,
really,
so, yeah.
I thought he was just called Big. By the way,
isn't it Mr. Big, or is it just Big? Maybe you're right. So there, they rebooted this show. It's called And Just Like That, and it's on Crave. But I don't know if you've caught any And Just Like That.
I have not. I've seen maybe 3 episodes of Sex and the City.
Is that
it? Yeah.
You weren't forced to watch that with
I was
partner.
forced. They were, she forced me to watch 3 episodes, and I basically said, if there was a show about guys talking like this, right, it would be off the air.
Isn't that called Entourage?
I don't know. I didn't watch that. I didn't watch that.
But I'll say this. Okay, so in my first marriage, my wife, I like to pretend she made me watch Sex and the City because it was a show she loved and we'd watch it together. And I'm now here to disclose for you. I feel comfortable disclosing to you, Scott. And before we get back to the serious business, we need a little break from the heavy talk. I'll just disclose to you that I secretly really liked the show. I liked this show. These 4 women talking openly about giving oral sex and about their lives and intimacy. And I actually totally dug it. So much so that I have a different wife now. Hi, Monica. And in this marriage, I'm like, do you want to try the reboot of And Just Like That? And I put it on for us. And all this is a long-winded way to say that I had heard Samantha, because Samantha had a falling out with the actresses. Look at how much I know about this. But Kim Cattrall had a falling out with the other actresses and did not want to participate in this reboot. So she's absent. They said, oh, she's in England. Oh, what a busy person. But I read somewhere she was going to make an appearance in the finale of this season 2. And I was like, oh, Samantha's coming back. This is exciting to me. Like, I'm not ashamed to tell you this, Scott. Mm-hmm. So I tune into this finale to see it. She literally phoned it in. It's just the actress Kim Cattrall playing the Samantha character. She's in the back of a cab or something, FaceTiming with Carrie and saying, sorry, I can't make your big party to say goodbye to the apartment. I wish I could be there. I love you. Bye. Like, didn't even step in the same room as these actresses.
Maybe the falling out is not over.
It's no, clearly.
Right,
I'm like,
it's-
oh my God, they're probably, Samantha's coming back. No, she recorded something. She just zoomed into this finale. And
That's basically, I will appear on the show virtually.
yeah, I will appear on the show, but I will not be in the same room as any of these actresses.
Yeah.
But if the check clears, you'll get a video message from me that you can use, is what happened there. Okay. Kim Cattrall once dated Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
I did not know that.
Yes, there's a photo of them going to something. Yeah, a young Kim Cattrall who spent a lot of time in Canada. Okay. See, Scott, you never know where Toronto Mike's going to take you. But now I need to get back to this, I hope I can pronounce it, this adjudicator.
Mhm.
So, okay, investigative process, 3 months. You meet with them a couple of days later. You're in a room. I'm guessing somebody's got a file. Someone from HR has got a folder, and there's someone there maybe from security. And like, you're getting the tap on the shoulder. Your services are no longer required. But they're like, go home, talk to your lawyer, whatever, and then whatever. But there's no severance here, which is an issue. So how does this get to an adjudicator?
Well, unfortunately, I've become, quite up to speed on employment law matters, which I had to right away.
Right.
And in this case, when you're going to challenge something for unjust dismissal, and it's in the federal domain because Bell Canada is federally regulated, you have 90 days to file your complaint. 90 days. And if you don't file in 90 days, well, too bad. So I filed, and then once you file, they send it to mediation, which, they try to mediate. And if that doesn't work, then you go to adjudication, which is like hearings with witnesses. They call people.
It's like court.
It's like court, but just a step below, because you're not actually in a court. You're not in a courthouse.
Right.
And we did all that from January 2019 until the ruling in July of 2020.
Okay, so I have a quote. This is from your Medium article. So according to you, Scott, the adjudicator wrote, I have serious concerns about the manner in which the investigation was conducted. While it was clear that the investigator was thorough in her actions and analysis, and that lengthy meetings were held with each of the quote-unquote players involved, the evidence suggests that significant errors were made.
Right, and those I included in the Medium essay 3 quotes from the adjudicator that have that same theme, right? About doubts, how the investigation was done, how it ended, right? Because there were questions of, well, the main question was, how did you investigate for 3 months? Sorry. Yeah. Come up with one conclusion, and then suddenly it changed in about 24 hours, right? That was the question. And there was no real strong explanation for that. It just, it didn't sort of sound on the up and up, and that's what the adjudicator was pointing to. And, that's why I focused on that, because that to me is the injustice, is how do you look into something and clear me and then not?
So have you received any money? Now we're 6 years out. So have you ever received any money, or is this literally you're fired for cause and you walked away with nothing? Right.
The adjudication ended. It was not successful, and no, there was nothing. It was, I cannot stress this more. If I did not make a complaint about a racist remark in the newsroom in front of 4 people, none of this would have happened. None of it. Because there wouldn't have been retribution. There wouldn't have been a group out to get me. The producer would not have, fired up her friends to get me. The producer was getting a lot of pressure in the middle of the adjudication to testify. But she didn't want to. She did not want to testify. And here, I'm going to tell you something that's absolutely stunning.
Okay.
The middle of the adjudication, I found out from my ally in the newsroom that the producer has quit her job. She quit her job, staff position, to go freelance at CBC. Out of the blue, in the middle of the adjudication. And the producer did not want to testify because again, I think she knew. Well,
And this
none
is
of
the
this,
producer who made the comments about your lip.
right? And this is basically this is basically about a year or so later, and they're being forced to testify, but they don't want to. They quit their job. They leave CTV, and then they decide that they need to get a lawyer. Now, how do I know that?
How do you know that?
So one day in the middle of the adjudication, it was June of 2019. June of 2019. I'm at home. I'm getting ready for the next court date, which is a few days from that. It was June the 24th. Our next hearing date was a couple days later, and my lawyer phones me and he said, "Are you playing a practical joke or something on me?" And I'm like, "No." Well, what happened? Well, the producer who lawyered up, or who wanted to lawyer up, a friend of hers suggested, "Hey, you may need a lawyer in this, right? Because of everything that's going on." And so she reached out to an employment lawyer who happened to be my lawyer.
Wow.
Who happened to be my...
What a small world.
I don't know how many employment lawyers there are in Toronto, but to send an email, and it basically said, "Hey, I have an employment law matter. I need to, do a consultation."
Sure.
One of my colleagues got fired for sexual harassment. He's fighting for his job back. The employer wants me to testify. I don't want to. I need some independent legal advice. What do you charge for an initial consultation? The last line was, there are some complicating factors.
Wow.
We received this email. We had to produce it. We had to give it to the adjudicator.
Disclosure, whatever.
To say, "Hey, your witness," who, they eventually just subpoenaed her. They subpoenaed two of their own witnesses. Their witness reached out to my lawyer to get help. I couldn't believe that happened, but it did.
Now I'm glad we kept names out of this. Okay, so that was a good call on your part. So, wow. Okay, so this is out of an episode of Columbo or something. There was no email in Columbo. It would be a snail mail signed arriving in the post office there. Okay, so I don't want to belittle any women in this story who felt sexually harassed, but when this behavior of yours that was deemed non-harassment in that March 8th email from the investigator, there's no sexual. They're not sexual in nature, right? You said you these are just. I'm just curious about, because all these women who say they got these messages from you that eventually led to your dismissal, which sounds like for cause. It sounds like sexual harassment is the cause that they used in order not to sever you fairly. So, because you don't have to sever someone, I suppose, in that situation. But
exactly.
These are not sexual. These are not sexual messages to women in the newsroom, right?
Well, an investigator looked into that for 3 months and said that it wasn't.
Right.
Until either she changed her mind or was told to change her mind. I'm not sure which one it was. So,
are you able? So this adjudication ruling that is against you. Did you have an option to appeal that?
You do. The problem with appeal is you get, when you initially challenge an unjust dismissal, one side wins, one side loses. Nobody pays anybody's costs. Right. When you appeal, I believe you have 6 months. I could be wrong on that, but you have a short window in which to appeal.
Right.
And my worry was, number one, I wasn't in a union, right? So a union wasn't playing quarterback on this for me. It was me. And I could appeal and risk losing, surprisingly again, and then have to pay the costs of BCE. I mean, they're hiring $800 lawyers, right?
It is, you use the term
$800 an hour lawyers.
Right. Right, because that'd be a bargain if they $800. The in your Medium piece, you called it David versus Goliath. I mean, and that's what this would be at that point. The pockets of BCE are rather deep, and I don't know, yours don't sound as deep.
That's again. That was the fundamental
reason you didn't appeal.
The fundamental reason was it was risky. It was also just financially impossible. I mean, I was carrying this on my own. Shockingly, it didn't work out the first time. To lose the second time and then have to pay their costs, forget it. No way. I'm not gonna risk that. And again, the window, it might have been 3 months, it might be 6 months, but you have a certain amount of time to do that. And what's been eating at me for all that time is that now people have this impression that, oh, Scott Laurie is X. This is false, right? And I had to write that to defend my name. Now, I don't know, how many people out there have to defend their names, but is it ever too late to defend your name? No, it isn't.
No, and this all starts with this, racism you experienced in the newsroom, that you stood up for yourself. And I do always am curious about if you had a time machine. Do you go back and say nothing after the Lips comment if you had a time machine?
I've thought about that, and I've received a few messages from people who have said, "Yeah, I've experienced the same thing." Even last night, somebody sent me an email saying, not an email, but a message on LinkedIn saying, "Yeah, I've experienced the same thing." And do I go back in a time machine and say, "Geez, maybe I just let it slide"? No, you do not let racism in the workplace slide. And had my bosses taken it seriously, and then had they realized that, oh, wait a second, there's retribution now because of this, which wouldn't have been that difficult to do.
Yeah, but
this wouldn't have happened.
I think the most valuable lesson I learned in my professional life was in my first full-time job, when I had the moment where I learned and I realized the epiphany, if you will, that HR does not work for you. Like, HR exists to mitigate risk for, well, in your case it would be for BCE, but for the ownership.
You see, I had never gone to HR in my life. The only time I had gone to HR probably twice at Bell Media, and it was for the employee share plan, right? That was it.
Right.
That was the only time I had ever gone there.
Right.
And it's just, why would I not go and make a complaint when somebody is absolutely being racist?
Do you know the name Hal Johnson? So Hal,
from the workout guy.
Participation.
Yes.
Yeah, with his wife Joanne. So he came on Toronto Mike, and he shared a story. This is before Bell Media owned TSN. So before Bell Media was the owner. But at TSN, which is now a Bell Media property, he was applying for a job, and he shared his story about how, I'm going to use his terminology here, but they already had a black guy. It was basically, he didn't get the job because they didn't need another black guy. This is Hal Johnson's story, and it's that was the 80s, and before Bell Media owned the story. But I did just share off the top that there's a lengthy conversation, and I haven't deleted any episodes of Toronto Mike, so you can hear Amber Giro talk about the racism that she experienced in the 1010 newsroom. But this shit's still going on, and what's bugging me in this story is similar to how I felt with Mike Stafford. And again, all different story completely. Mike Stafford, how he was treated by Chorus, but I felt he was done dirty, and that Chorus got away with not having to pay him any severance, and it bugs me to this moment I'm talking to you now. But your story there, if they had let you go and severed you fairly, the way the law works, as I understand it, is, they don't need a reason to let you go if they sever you fairly. I think they could fire you at any time for any reasons if they, so in the Me Too era, even though this investigator said this is not harassment and you shouldn't lose your job,
right?
It's easier for them to just say goodbye to Scott and then cut you a check. But they didn't do that. And that's that's pissing me off right now. And I think it's, you tying it to you stand up for yourself because of the Lips comment, and I'm glad you stood up for yourself, except your story is a cautionary tale.
You know what? I as crazy as this sounds, I might have stood up for myself a little too strongly. In the middle of this entire process, right, when I was pushing to have the producer just moved off the show,
right,
there were a couple of meetings between my bosses and HR, and at the very last meeting, it was almost as if they were trying to convince me, come on, it wasn't racist. It was just a joke. And then my boss said, actually, in the middle of that conversation, as they were trying to convince me that it wasn't racist, I had it, and I said to the three people that were there, I said, you know what, if one other person in this room besides me were black, you'd understand why I think it was racist. And my boss said, you're not playing that card, are you?
Oh boy.
And
your boss is a white person.
And in front of HR. And I was stunned. It was like, what universe are we in where someone is going to say that? Right? And that meeting just ended badly. It just ended badly because I got the sense that wow, they really don't care, right? They just don't care. And ultimately, the producer was moved, but at the time I thought, all right, the producer's friends are mad. Maybe my boss is mad. I have no idea, but this has been just a mess, right? All because I stood up to someone who made fun of my lips.
What an infuriating story, Scott. My goodness gracious. Okay. So let's bring it to the current day here. So we're 6 years removed from you being fired from your dream job there at CTV News. And as you disclosed off the top, you've been interviewing for jobs. So why did it end for you at the Toronto Sun? Was this just a contract that expired, or?
And I'm glad you brought that up because I almost forgot. If I didn't mention Adrian Batra, the editor-in-chief, and Jack Boland and Jonathan Kingstone, and Mr. Hahn, who, they basically, did me a favor and gave me a job. Adrian called me out of the blue and said, you know what happened to you is BS.
Yep, that's a good word for it.
Would you come work for us? And I thought, hey, why not? Maybe my thinking was, because the Sun is really on a push to do, more video, and because the media landscape, especially in newspapers,
pivot to video, Scott.
Right. It's just there's so much change going on that who knows where we are in that change and where it's going to end up. But I thought, okay, I can go there. And maybe someone in television land is going to say, well, maybe Scott is, employable, right? And so I was there for 19 months. It was great. It was almost like getting a redo on being a local reporter in Toronto again, because the first time around when I was at CBLT, it was not very long and I was not very good. And this time it was, everything was going on. COVID was happening. There were a lot of demonstrations that were happening around that.
Right.
Things were sort of opening up again. The invasion of Ukraine started. Like, there was a lot going on, and it was just good. It was a good way to get my mind off of things and get back into doing journalism. It was fun, and I really owe a big thank you to Adrian Batra and Jonathan and.
But that did come to an end.
Yes, it did. I left because I happened to get a new job.
Okay. It's a good reason.
Yes, exactly. I got a new job, and right. It was short, and here we are. Like, I'm now looking for work again, and again, because throughout this entire summer that we just went through, right, 5 interviews. Great. There were fantastic interviews, and it was just nothing.
And you think it's due to this stink on you because
100%.
When people start asking around, it's going to be revealed that you were fired for cause for sexual harassment.
Right.
And who wants to hire that guy, right?
Right. And no one knows the backstory of how we got to that point.
Right.
And I think, call me biased, but I think that's important.
Are you following, and I'm not sure how this is resolved, but I was reading an article about your former colleague, Paul Bliss. Are you friendly with Paul Bliss?
I am not. That's the last conversation I ever had with Paul Bliss, I think, was in 2018.
2018. Okay. Because he launched a $7.5 million lawsuit over his dismissal. And he was facing sexual misconduct allegations, and he was suing CTV News, and of course, and I actually need to find out what happened with that lawsuit. But I'm just
that's a good question. I do not know.
But I'm just wondering, like, have you consulted a lawyer? Like, it's if your reputation has been damaged, and I'm going to quote you again because I did it off the top, and this is how I want to close our chat. But you wrote, "For 6 years, I have lived with this. I have been tarnished with an unfair public impression that I am a workplace risk because of the continuing and overwhelming cost to me on my career, my mental health, my personal relationships, my quality of life, and my name. I cannot be silent anymore." So I want to see. So obviously your career, are you working right now, Scott?
No.
So you're currently looking for work, and that's why you've had these interviews that have gone quite well until the crickets appear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. Your mental health. So this is 6 years removed, and I know that your coping mechanism is the hockey game, and I'm glad that exists. But how are you doing?
You know, it's yeah. You live with something like this every day, and it's you know, you think, what if this and what if that, and yeah, and how am I doing? Well, I'm trying to get through every day, you know, one step at a time, basically. And you know, my original plan was just keep applying for work, you know, something will come through, and it got to the point where I'm not sure. Yeah, I mentioned 5, but you know, since 2018, I've probably applied for thousands of jobs. Thousands. I'm not kidding. Thousands. Even at CBC, and, you know, a few at Global, many in communications, government communications, corporate communication, nothing. So it's, you know, how am I doing? I'm trying to get through things. I'm hoping that if people have a better understanding of what really happened, then that might help.
Well, I'm glad you're talking about this. On the live stream, Canada Kev called it Bell Don't Talk. So instead of the Let's Talk, he says it's Bell Don't Talk, because you stood up for yourself, and here you are now. But you do deserve your name back. Like, I think context is important in this case, because you're right. If the you know, you're in a shrinking industry, so there's high demand for these jobs, and then just having been fired for sexual harassment at CTV at Bell Media, that might result in the crickets if people don't understand the context of this story. And I don't think that's fair to you at all. And I'm very glad that you've decided to talk about this.
Well, just yesterday, one of my acquaintances, Facebook friends, told me exactly that. I mean, that she was very happy that I decided to come forward. And about a year and a half ago, that person reached out to me just out of the blue, completely. It was an odd contact, and it came about 10 years after she left CTV, and she basically said, "Hey, Scott, I wanted to let you know that, you know, a couple of months after you got fired from CTV, somebody from CTV reached out to me asking me if I wanted to complain about you."
Wow.
And this person, 2 people have done that, but this person circled back to me and said, you know, after you were fired, they were still looking for people who would complain about you, and they refused, right? And I don't know why they did that. Like, why? If I'm out the door already, I'm gone, right?
Yeah.
And they were still looking for people, and I think it was because I had challenged it at adjudication, and they were looking for justification for something that was unjustified, and did not, like, it was just not something that was appropriate under the circumstances.
Also, they may have always felt like there might be a day when you decide to tell your story, right? Like this day that arrived very recently when I read that piece that you spent 6 weeks writing, that was in the Medium piece. Like, you're now telling your story, and they probably thought that day might arrive, and maybe they had more ammunition or something.
I really don't know, but I was shocked when 2 people that I worked with contacted me years later to say, did you know that months after you were gone, they were phoning me asking, hey, would you like to make a complaint about Scott Laurie? And they said, hell no, that guy was set up, right? It was a witch hunt. That's what they said.
Yeah, I'm getting pissed off here. Okay, not at you, Scott, at this whole situation you're in here. So the cost, you mentioned your career has been clear, your mental health, man, I hope you have somebody you can talk to, because I know how dire that can be for people, and I hope that you're taking care of your mental health here.
Trying my best.
Trying your best. I hope you score a hattie in the next hockey game.
That was Sunday.
Did you score?
3 times.
Oh yeah, okay, you got a hattie. Okay, yeah, okay, that's how you get a hat trick. My personal relationship, so you don't have to disclose what you don't want to disclose, but it sounds like this last 6 years might have affected your personal relationships. Is that beyond, colleagues who felt you were a sexual harasser, or is there more there?
No, there are some there are some people that I've not heard from at all. Like people you think, oh yeah, I'll hear from them. No, nothing,
Right.
Zero. Just it's like, it's almost like you stop existing. Right. And I just felt, at the beginning of this year, I have to start existing again. And This is one way of doing it, by saying, hey, this is what happened. And, don't just take what's out there as the truth. But honestly, in some cases, it feels like people write you off and you don't exist anymore.
Have you ever seen The Wire?
Love that show.
Okay, well, what does Marlo say? My name is my name.
I did not know that.
Well, I'll lend you my box set here. It's in the liner notes, Scott. But your name is your name, and really, at the end of the day, you just want your name back. And I hope you get your name back, and I hope we stop hearing these crickets. Because what I watched, you're great at what you do, and you stood up for yourself when a producer made a racist remark, and I respect that. And I respect you sharing your story, and I'm glad we got to meet here. It was worth the drive. You're getting the lasagna, the beer, and thank you for the real talk, man.
Thank you very much.
And I hope it all works out. We'll get you back for a sequel when things turn around, and I see you back. We'll get you back for a sequel and catch up with you.
See you soon.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,438th show. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Toronto Mike. So Scott, is there? I know you're on X, formerly known as Twitter, as at I think it's _ Scott Laurie. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, is that the way you'd like people to follow your adventures and find out where you end up next?
Yeah, I'm not as active on X as I normally would be.
Good for you.
Only because as somebody
It's a cesspool.
as somebody once described it, it's a river of bile with the odd, nugget.
No, well said. I'm going to borrow that line, actually. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. Don't forget your beer, Scott. Palma Pasta. I'm going to get your lasagna in a moment. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Raymond James Canada. And Ridley Funeral Home. There's your measuring tape, Scott. Tomorrow, I'm dropping a great conversation with Alfie Zappacosta about Tears Are Not Enough, the Pizza Nova jingle, and more. That'll be episode... Here's what I did, Scott. So I recorded it, and normally I drop things right away, but I had this one in the can. But I said, okay, 439 Pizza Nova. This is his jam. He sings that. He composes this thing. This is his jam. So he could be episode 1439. See how clever
that's
what's
pretty
going on
good.
here? Yeah, because you're 1438, and he'll be tomorrow. See you all then.
That's true, yes I do.